Marian Anderson, 1897 to 1993. Anderson was an African American contralto who performed a wide range of music from opera to spirituals. Born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on 27 February 1897, she grew up there and later performed with renowned orchestras at major concert and recital venues throughout the segregated United States and Europe between 1925 and 1965. But she constantly faced racial discrimination in both places. After realizing that her singing career in the U.S. was facing too many obstacles based on her race, and that she was performing for mostly black audiences, Anderson decided to try to revive her career in Europe, as some other black opera singers had done before her. She won scholarships to study in Europe, first in London in 1930, and later in Berlin in 1933. In Berlin, she studied German, an important operatic language, and learned the art of singing German lieder. Most people today are familiar with the incident concerning Marian Anderson and the Daughters of the American Revolution in 1939, when that organization refused to allow Anderson to perform at the Daughters of the American Revolution's Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. With help from Eleanor Roosevelt, wife of President Franklin Roosevelt, she stood up to the DAR by singing Schubert and African American spirituals on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial to an audience of over 75,000 people. But that was not the first time that Anderson had confronted racism in a dramatic way. Throughout the 1930s in Nazi Germany and fascist Austria, Anderson did similar things more than once. When the 1935 Salzburg Festival rejected Anderson's request to perform as part of the festival, her manager forced a compromise. On the first night of the festival, she sang at the Mozarteum Concert Hall to a small audience. A few days later, she performed again, this time privately in a hotel ballroom with about 300 invited guests who reinforced her defiance by their attendance.
And the German was Hugo self-taught, if you know what I mean. And I went to the language, what they call the Language Institute, and I had a very few lessons, as a matter of fact. We went to Germany unknown, of course, and we had worked there just a very short time. And, as well, it probably wouldn't have happened now. But if there's a manager and he's interested, one of the first things he wants you to do was to give him money that he can present you. Yes. And there were very few people. And the audience was, after the beginning, really very, very warm. I see. Very warm indeed. You sang for, I believe, about 2 more years in your successful concerts, and you sang also in Salzburg, a singularly successful concert. And it's written that you used spirituals to close what was otherwise a traditional program. This made a great impact on people. I believe it was about this time that Toscanini made his very famous remark, "A voice such as this comes once in 100 years."
Back in the USA, Anderson had already decided to bring Kosti Verhanen back with her for the new U.S. concert season under manager Saul Hurok, which meant she had to say goodbye to her longtime black friend and accompanist, Billy King. Billy had tried to deter the switch by pointing out that having a white accompanist on stage with an African American singer could be a problem in 1935 America. In the end, it caused barely a ripple. But Anderson had grown comfortable with Verhanen during the more than 2 years he had worked together with her all across Europe. She felt she needed his talents for her upcoming U.S. concert season. Howard Taubman, who would later ghostwrite Anderson's 1956 autobiography, writing for the New York Times, proclaimed, quote, Marian Anderson has returned to her native land, one of the great singers of our time. The Negro contralto who has been abroad for 4 years established herself in her concert at the town hall last night as the possessor of an excelling voice and art. Her singing enchanted an audience that included singers. There was no doubt of it. She was mistress of all she surveyed, end quote. Her program displayed variety in all ways. She sang Handel arias, Schubert lieder, Finnish songs, and black spirituals. In 1950, Anderson returns to Berlin at the request of the U.S. military. She sings in 2 sold-out shows, one in West Berlin and another in Munich. In West Berlin, she appears at the Titania Palast Cinema before an enthusiastic audience of 2,000 composed of Allied soldiers and Germans. But it is highly ironic that the U.S. military at this time is still racially segregated, and when Anderson stays at the U.S. Army-run Hotel Excelsior in Munich, there are protests by white Americans against her staying there. Odd, isn't it? Anderson would go on to have a long and illustrious career in the United States and internationally. It would be 1965 before her farewell tour and official retirement. May I add, she sang at the March on Washington in 1963 before Martin Luther King and the many other civil rights leaders that day. She had to go to Europe in order to be appreciated in her own country. I repeat, she had to go to Europe in order to be appreciated in her own country. She had to work hard and prove herself in ways a white performer would not have had to undergo.
He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the big round world in his hands. He's got the wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.